The voicemail lasted 47 seconds. I listened to it once, standing in the kitchen of my flat in Edinburgh, still in my coat from the commute, keys in my hand. My brother's voice. Controlled. The specific control of someone who has rehearsed what they're about to say and is delivering it in the tone designed to make refusal seem unreasonable. We need you to let this go. Dad's reputation, the family name, there's too much at stake. Just stay quiet. For once, Maya, just stay quiet. For once, I set my keys on the counter, took off my coat, made tea I didn't drink, and thought about everything that phrase contained for once, and everything my family had spent 37 years trying to make me into. My name is Maya Cole, and staying quiet was the one thing I had never been willing to do for them. This is the year that stopped being a problem for me and started being a problem for them. Let me take you back. Not to the voicemail. Further, to the particular architecture of a family that runs on silence the way other families run on conversation. My father was Dr. William Cole, 68 years old, retired academic, 31 years as a professor of economics at a respected university, the last 9 as department head. The kind of man whose professional reputation had become, over decades, the primary weather system of our family, everything arranged around it, everything calibrated to protect it. He had 2 children. My brother James, 39, a university administrator, the son who had understood early that the easiest way to thrive in our family was to become a supporting character in our father's story. And me. I had committed the particular sin of having opinions that didn't align with the narrative. Not loudly, not constantly, but at the specific moments when the narrative required someone to contradict it, I had contradicted it. At 12, when I told my grandmother at Christmas dinner that my father had misquoted a study he was citing, and was right. At 19, when I told my father his retirement planning advice was based on an outdated tax framework, and was right. At 26, when I questioned the methodology of a paper he had submitted for peer review, and was right. Each time, the response was not engagement. It was the look. The specific look of a man who has organized his understanding of the world around his own authority and has encountered a disruption he cannot categorize. Followed by silence. Followed by the temperature of the house dropping by several degrees. Followed by my mother finding me later to explain, quietly, that I needed to be more careful about how I said things. Not what I said. How? Because the what was always correct. The how was never gentle enough to be survivable. I became a data analyst. Not for the family, for myself. Because I had spent my entire childhood noticing that the numbers behind the narrative were frequently different from the narrative itself. And I found that gap more interesting than any story told to cover it. 12 years in the field. The last 4 running an independent consultancy. Small, precise, the kind of work that required both technical rigor and the specific courage to tell clients things they had paid to hear, but not paid to enjoy. I was good at it. I was good at it for the same reason I had always been difficult at family dinners. I told the truth about what the numbers said, even when the numbers said something inconvenient. Especially then. The problem began 8 months before the voicemail. My father, in the final years of his academic career, had developed a public profile beyond the university, media appearances, a column in a financial publication, a following among a certain audience of people who wanted economic commentary delivered with authority and confidence. He had built this profile carefully. He had also, in building it, made several claims. Public claims, documented on record. Claims about economic policy impacts in specific regions, citing specific data, drawing specific conclusions that had been repeated widely enough to influence several local policy discussions. I had been reading his column for 2 years. I had been making notes for 18 months. Because the data he was citing, the specific data sets, the specific studies, the methodology he described, did not support the conclusions he was drawing. Not marginally. Substantially. It wasn't fabrication. I want to be clear about that. It was the more insidious thing, the pattern of a man who had spent so long being the authority in the room that he had stopped interrogating his own analysis, who had cherry-picked supporting data without checking the contradicting data, who had presented confidence as rigor for long enough that the two had become indistinguishable in his own mind. I spent 3 months building a full analysis, not to expose him, to understand the scope of the problem. By the end of those 3 months, I understood that the scope was significant, and that the policy discussions his claims had influenced were heading in directions that were going to cost real people real money. I called my brother first. I want to be clear about this because it matters. I did not go public first. I did not contact journalists. I did not post anything. I called James on a Tuesday evening and told him, carefully and specifically, what I had found. I walked him through 3 of the most significant examples. I explained the methodology gap. I explained the policy implications. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What do you want to do about it?" "I want Dad to correct the record," I said. "Publicly, specifically, he has the platform, he can use it to walk back the conclusions that aren't supported and reframe the analysis correctly. Nobody gets hurt. The policy discussions get better information. He takes a small reputational hit that honest people will respect him for." Another silence. "He won't do that," James said. "Then I need to publish the analysis myself," I said. "Imaya." "James, people are making policy decisions based on incorrect economic analysis. That's not a family matter. That's a public interest matter. It will destroy him. A correction will damage him," I said. "Not addressing it will eventually destroy him when someone else finds it, and they will find it." I paused. "I'm giving him the chance to control it." James said he would talk to our father. He came back 3 days later. Our father's response, "Tell her to let it go." I didn't let it go. The voicemail from James arrived 4 days before I published. I had given them 8 months. 8 months of internal conversation, of private emails, of 3 separate meetings where I had laid out the analysis and asked, clearly and without aggression, for a correction. Each time, the response was a variation of the same thing. "This is a family matter. You're misunderstanding the methodology. You've always had to make everything difficult." That last one from my father directly, in a phone call in month 6, when the private conversations had run out of road. "You've always had to make everything difficult, Maya." I had held the phone for a moment. Thought about the 12-year-old at the Christmas dinner. The 19-year-old at the kitchen table. The 26-year-old questioning the methodology of a paper that had subsequently been revised by a peer reviewer who had noticed the same problem. Yes, I said, I have. And I had hung up. I published on a Thursday morning. Not on a personal blog. In an economics policy journal that had agreed to peer review the analysis, 3 reviewers, none of whom knew whose work they were evaluating, all 3 of whom confirmed the methodology and the conclusions. The piece was specific, it was technical, it was not personal. It named the claims, it named the data sources. It showed, in precise and documented steps, the gap between the two. It did not call my father dishonest. It called the analysis unsupported. That distinction was deliberate. And in my field, it was the more serious charge. The response arrived in waves. The first wave was professional, researchers, economists, policy analysts who had been citing my father's work and who now had a problem. The responses ranged from grateful to mortified, but they were engaged, which meant the problem was being addressed. The second wave was personal. My father did not call. My brother called 4 times in the first 48 hours. I answered the second call. You've humiliated him, James said. I've published a peer-reviewed correction, I said. Those are different things. To him, they're the same thing. I know, I said. That's been the problem. Maya, he's 68 years old. His career was built on analysis, I said. If the analysis was wrong, the career needs to account for that. That's how the field works. A pause. I gave him 8 months to account for it himself. He chose not to. Because you backed him into a corner. I gave him a door, I said. He chose not to walk through it. James was quiet for a long time. You know this changes things, he said, with the family. I know, I said. You might not be welcome. James, I kept my voice even. I have been making myself smaller my entire life to be welcome at that table. I am done making myself smaller. A pause. If the table requires my silence as the price of admission, then I don't want to sit at it. He said nothing. I'm not angry at you, I said. I know where you sit in this. I'm not asking you to choose. A pause. But I'm not going to apologize for the work. My mother called on the 4th day. I had been waiting for this call. Not with dread. With the specific readiness of someone who has been preparing for a conversation for a very long time. She spoke for a while first. About my father. About the calls he was receiving. About the column which had been suspended pending review. About the university, which had issued a careful statement about the importance of methodological rigor. I listened. When she finished, I said, Are you calling to ask me to apologize? A silence. No, she said. Then what? I'm calling because I've been wanting to say something for 37 years, she said, and I keep waiting for the right moment, and I've realized there isn't one, so I'm just going to say it. I waited. You were right, she said. Every time, the Christmas dinner, the tax framework, the methodology, every time you said something that made him uncomfortable, you were right. Her voice was steady, but it cost her. And I told you to be more careful about how you said it. And what I should have said, she stopped. What I should have said was that you were right and I was proud of you and you didn't need to make yourself smaller. The kitchen of my Edinburgh flat was very quiet. Mum, I said. I know it's late, she said. I know that doesn't fix anything. It doesn't fix anything, I said, but it matters. A long pause. Are you all right? She said. Yes, I said, and meant it. The work, she said, what you published, I read it. I know you wouldn't understand all of it. I understood enough, she said. I understood that you had been carrying it for a long time, and you did it properly, and you did it carefully, and you tried to give him the chance to do it himself first. A pause. That's more than he deserved. I looked out the window of my flat. Edinburgh in November. The particular gray that feels, somehow, honest. Will he talk to me? I said. Not yet, she said. Maybe not for a while. A pause. But eventually, I think yes. When the dust settles. When he's had time to understand the difference between being challenged and being destroyed. She paused. Your father has never had someone love him enough to tell him the truth. He's always had people who told him what he wanted to hear. I know, I said. That's not love, she said. What you did, even though it hurt, that's closer to love than anything else in this family has managed. I held the phone. Thank you, I said, for saying that. Thank you, she said, for not staying quiet. The professional fallout took 3 months to settle. 2 of my father's most cited policy claims were formally retracted by the journals that had published them. The column was discontinued. The university conducted an internal review. I was not involved in it, had not requested it, and had no visibility into its outcome beyond what was published publicly, which was a statement about enhanced peer review processes for faculty with external platforms. My father issued a statement. Not an apology. I had not expected one and did not require one. A correction. Specific, technical, addressing 3 of the 5 claims I had identified. Not all of them, but 3. From a man who had spent his career treating his own analysis as unquestionable, 3 was more than I had dared to expect. I read the statement twice. Did not comment on it publicly. Did not send a message. Let it be what it was, a man, at 68, doing something that had cost him considerably and doing it anyway. It was a beginning. It was not a resolution. But it was a beginning. James called 6 weeks after the statement. Not about our father. About himself. I've been thinking, he said, about the way things work in our family. A pause. About the way I've always worked in our family. Yes, I said. I've spent 20 years making sure nobody was uncomfortable, he said. Making sure the temperature stayed stable. Making sure Dad felt confirmed and Mum wasn't stressed and you didn't say anything that would start something. A pause. I told myself that was keeping the peace. It was, I said. It just wasn't peace for everyone. He was quiet. I told you to stay quiet, he said, in the voicemail. Yes. I was wrong. I held that. I know you were trying to protect him, I said. I was protecting the version of the family I needed to believe existed, he said, not actual people. A pause. You were the only one who was doing that. I wasn't doing it to be heroic, I said. I was doing it because I couldn't look at the data and pretend I'd seen something different. I know, he said. That's always been the thing about you. A pause. I used to think it was a flaw. I know you did. It's not, he said. I smiled. Not because I needed him to know it. Because he finally did. My father called on a Sunday. 8 months after publication. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. He spoke first, for a long time. The slow, careful speech of a man choosing words with the specific care of someone who has spent a long time not choosing carefully enough. He said he had read the analysis. All of it, including the methodology sections he had initially dismissed. He said he understood now, not just that the conclusions were wrong, but why they were wrong, and how he had allowed confidence to substitute for rigor over a period of years. He said he had been surrounded, for most of his career, by people who agreed with him. He said he understood now what that had cost. He did not say, "I'm sorry." He said, "You were doing what I taught you to do. You were following the evidence wherever it led. I just didn't expect it to lead there." I sat with that. "That's the thing about evidence," I said. "It goes where it goes." "Yes," he said. "You taught me that," I said, "before you stopped believing it applied to you." A silence. "Yes," he said again, quietly. "I'm not asking you to be grateful," I said. "I'm not asking you to endorse what I did. I'm just telling you I would do it again, because the work was right, and because I'm not able to be the person in this family who makes themselves smaller so everyone else can feel bigger." He was quiet for a long time. "I know," he said finally. "I'd like to have dinner," I said, "when you're ready, not to relitigate any of it, just dinner." Another long pause. "Yes," he said, "when I'm ready." "Call me," I said. "I will," he said. He hung up. I put the phone down. Looked out at Edinburgh. Still gray, still honest. They wanted me silent. They had always wanted me silent. Not from malice, from the specific human preference for comfort over accuracy, for a story that confirms what is known over evidence that revises it. I had never been able to give them that. Not at 12. Not at 19. Not at 37. The silence they wanted was the silence of someone who has decided that belonging is worth more than truth. I had never been able to make that trade. And I had spent years believing that was a flaw, a difficulty, an inability to read the room, a failure of warmth. It was not. It was the only thing I had that was entirely mine. The willingness to say what the numbers said. Even when the numbers said something nobody at the table wanted to hear. Especially then. They asked her to stay quiet. She published anyway. And the correction that followed was the most honest thing the family had produced in 30 years. Have you ever been asked to silence something true because someone else found the truth inconvenient? Tell me below. And if you know someone who has been told to be smaller, to be quieter, to stop making things difficult, send this to them. They'll know exactly what it means.